have one item for new business, one opportunity for us to be able to address the public in regards to our COVID policy and our procedures. There's been a couple of unconfirmed messages out on social media, and we want to use this time in this public setting to be able to address them, to have the superintendent to be able to address them. One is in regards to our procedures for contact tracing, and who is responsible for conducting the contact tracing and how that process looks. As also in regards to contact tracing, when we talk about what is it that we're providing to the Department of Health, if any information, what is that for process look? So that's number one. And secondly is in regards to our policy as relates to quarantine. I know there was some things that we were doing a little differently last school year, as opposed to this school year. So there's some concerns out there about students who may be inside the classroom and someone has tested positive, but the other students in the classroom are not showing symptoms, and by them staying home, that they will receive an unexcused absence. So if our superintendent could address those two concerns.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, and those excellent questions. I wish I had thought to put a COVID update on the agenda, but I didn't. So let me address those as best I can. As far as contact tracing this year is different than it was last year. Last year, we would have students who were supposed to be at least 6 feet apart, and if a student tested positive, then we tried to find out if someone had been around that student who tested positive, or person who tested positive, for 15 minutes within the last 24 hours. This year, we have been given authority by the Georgia Department of Health to waive that quarantine for students who were considered close contacts. What happens this year is, and we just got a letter today from Dr. Toomey reiterating this, that for schools that have a requirement for students who are wearing masks, they do not quarantine if they're a close contact. So the student who is a positive has to go home and quarantine, but because we in Bibb County are requiring students to wear masks, we do not have to have people who were in the past considered close contacts to have to quarantine. So that's why it's different. I thought we put that out in one communication, and I think I saw an article off one of the TV stations, but the more we can say it, the better, because some people are still confused. And so I thank you for asking. As far as students who are absent and how we contact and communicate with the Department of Public Health, two things happen. One, if a person tests positive outside of a school location, the Department of Public Health does the contact tracing for that individual. And if it turns out it's a person who's at school, then they let us know, and that person quarantines. We've asked the parent to let us know. If they don't let us know, what I've asked our staff to do is to call the family after a student's been absent for 3 consecutive days and find out why, so we can see what's going on. If it's on the other end, where we find out that a student is positive, we do have communications with the Department of Public Health, but we don't do contact tracing inside the school based on what I just shared with you before. And that goes for all facility locations as well as other activities that we have here. I've had some people say that they were concerned about close contacts inside the cafeteria when people are eating as well, because they have to remove the mask and they will be within a close area. I've given principals permission to have maybe half the school to be in the cafeteria, half the school would be in the classroom, but even inside the classroom, if the desks are 3 feet apart, which they are, that would still be considered a close contact. But we're meeting the requirements that restaurants and others are meeting in that regard as far as feeding. And so, again, we do not have to quarantine in that particular case. And those are not considered close contacts. The third question you asked about was absences. And what happens is, if a person is contacted by the Department of Public Health and is told that they need to quarantine, then that is an excused absence. If a parent decides that they want to keep a child home, then that is not an excused absence, for obvious reasons. The situation arises, though, that sometimes, and this gets to a third piece that you asked about, which is, how do we notify parents when a person has tested positive? When the school year started, what we did was we said that we would have one call that would go out to the grade level in a school saying a student in your grade level tested positive. Parents complained. They said that was not specific enough. And so I asked our staff to look into it to see if we could do something different. And so starting this week, what we've done now is if a student tests positive inside a classroom, we now notify that particular classroom that a student has tested positive. And in both cases, we ask the family to monitor for symptoms, and if something occurs, then go get your child tested. I've also been asked, why don't we, when a student tests positive, require a negative test before they return? And the answer to that is because the Department of Public Health and the CDC has said that that is not the guidance. They need to be out for a period of time, and then after that period of time has been out because of their status, then they are required to return to school. So we've been asked not to have them readmitted to school based upon the results of the test. I think I got them all, but I'm not sure.
Yes, sir, you did. I do have just a couple of follow-ups.
Before you do your follow-ups, let me ask, Stephanie, did I say anything incorrect? Tansy, did I say anything incorrect? Jamie? Okay, go ahead, sir.
I guess, so my next question goes along the lines of our preparedness for our worst-case scenario with having to go back to 100% virtual learning. Have laptops and devices, electronic devices been distributed to our students, and the training or whatever, onboarding of making sure that computers are working and that students know how to log on to the various ClassLink and all those other procedures. Is that in place to where if we, God forbid, have to go back to 100% virtual learning, that students will be, all our schools will be ready to do that?
Okay, so let me address it in a longer way first, and then I'll come back to it. So this year, let me change that. So last year, when we made a decision to go virtual, it was all based upon the amount of community spread, and we monitor that number, and I shared that information with you. This year, the question is not about community spread in the community, but it's about community spread within the school. And so we have developed some tools that allow us on a daily basis to see in a particular classroom how many students are currently quarantining because they've been identified as a positive. And if COVID is spreading inside a classroom, it's got to be at least 2 or 3. And so for a typical classroom of 25, that 2 would then be 10%. So we are now monitoring classroom levels for 10% to see if we have at least that percentage of students who are out and quarantining because they were positive. If it hits 3, then I'm not going to say I'm going to have that class go home, but it's going to be extra looks, because what we do is we ask the principal, how close were these kids sitting together? When did they both test positive? When they start showing symptoms, so we can try and analyze that. If you take that same situation and say you have 4 classrooms of 25 each, you could have 2 classrooms that have 2 kids in all 4, and they still don't hit that 10% number I talked about, but you could have spread inside the grade level. So for the grade levels, we're now looking and monitoring at 8%, because that will help us figure that out. So again, we can go in and look. And for the school, in order to talk about closing a school because of it, we're looking at is 5% of the students currently quarantining because of that as well. And so we're monitoring classroom, grade level, and class. Ms. Powell is not here. My understanding is the first week of school, we were not ready to close school because we had not gotten devices back out. We've had principals ask us, can they send devices home with kids if they're testing positive? And the answer to that is yes. We're still having students sign in now on a daily basis, mostly on a daily basis, so they do know how to use ClassLink, they do know how to sign in, and some of them are getting some assignments sent home. And so I think if we had to close school, we would be ready to do that. Monica, do you have anything to add to any of that?
I would say that the media specialists have been working to get the laptops distributed and the iPads distributed to all the classes. And the students did have them, they used them to do testing this last week, so all students who participated in the assessment testing had plenty of practice logging into their computer and their device. And so if we had to, we are ready, and we've done followed our procedures for getting parental permission to use the laptops.
And Stephanie just told me it's Michelle, not Monica.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's all right. I answered both of these.
Yes, you did. I appreciate that. You covered for me well.
Okay. I think that, for the most part, answers that question. Didn't really, I don't know if I heard clear about, as far as our one-to-one initiative, right? That we have, I know we're only within the second week of school. If all those devices, that every child
There's a
has
device
access
for
to a
every-
device that they've been
Yes,
assigned
sir. Every child has access to a device.
to. Excuse me, not have access, let me change that
Okay.
language then. Actually has a device with them.
And the reason I say they have access is because in the lower grades, we check out to classes. But if we had to go remote, then there is a device for every single student.
And define lower classes.
Pre-K, K1, and 2. 3 and 4 are generally, the students have the device with them all day.